and welcome Diablo 4 Druid players. I know I'm late to the party, but today we're going to discuss the Druid changes coming in the mid-season patch, so let's take a look at this together. Alrighty, for the Druids, their Tornado skill is getting a buff. We are getting a resource cost reduction from 40 to 35. This overall is, I say, a good buff for Tornado Storm Druids. Storm Strike, remove the 20% reduced damage when Storm Strike chains to surrounding enemies. I probably net neutral on this. Rabies, poisoning damage increased from 175 to 275% damage. The lack of poison scaling in the form of multipliers, even with the buff we're going to discuss here in a few moments, I don't think this is enough. Grizzly Rage, the damage bonus increased from 30% to 50%. While this is good, it does not clarify if the cap is also increased 20%. It's just pretty clear that the 50% increased damage is where you'll start from. And then also there's still the issue that the cooldown doesn't start till Grizzly Rage ends, which is also still net not good. The increased damage multiplier at the start of using it, while good, it still has limitations, and then you can't refresh it easily as the cooldown won't start until you are done the ability. So for the passives here, one with natures, the damage bonus for companions increased by 20%. That's a buff. The overpower damage increased by 25%, which is significant. The Beastal Rampage, we're getting 10% to the damage, and then also another 10% for the attack speed. Both are strong. Lupine Ferocity, critical strike damage increased from 70% multiplier to 100%, and from 140% multiplier to 200% multiplier against injured enemies. So, I'm confused. Lupine Ferocity was never a crit strike damage multiplier. It was only applied to your third hit from Lupine Ferocity. So I don't know if this is a buff, actually. This could be a buff if it actually is crit damage increased. But if it's only from the third hit, that the Lupine Ferocity, this is still really bad. It's inconsistent, especially when you're playing Shred and you're using the Agile Wolf aspect and you have that fourth hit. There's no way to easily chain that into your most powerful hit. So you're going to be getting that buff damage very inconsistently to everything that you're doing here. While these damage increases are significant, the inconsistency of it at all for a build that would want to run Lupine Ferocity is not that great. So I think Lupine Ferocity still needs a rework here. Now, Earth and Might, base chance increase from 10 to 15, that's fine. Critical strike increase by 5%, that's fine. And the bonus chance for hitting a stun, immobilized, or knocked back to enemies is also increased 5%. So just a small buff to give it a little more power. Nature's Fury's chance is increased to 40%. So again, buff and power. Perfect Storm, Spirit Gain increased from 1 to 2. That's fine. Damage increased by 15%, which is also fine. Just straight damage increases. The Spirit Boons got some decent increases in power. So Pack Leader, the chance for companion skills to reset is up to 30% now, which is great. It's fine. It's a buff. Calamity, ultimate skill duration increased to 35%. This is going to be very strong on Cataclysm builds. It'll be decent on Grizzly Rage. And even on Lupine Ferocity, that's going to give you a few extra hits. Or not Lupine Ferocity, on Lacerate, that's going to give you a few extra hits there. So I think it's going to be good enough for sure. It's definitely good enough. Scythe Talon, critical strike chance increased by 15%. So an extra 5% crit chance for that is great. An extra 5% attack speed from the swooping attacks is also great. The crit damage multiplier is an additional 10% up to 40% now for the Avian Wrath, which is really great. Same for Iron Feather. We're getting another 10% increase to our health there, which is great. Overload, I don't know if increasing it to this 250% damage increase is going to make much of a difference. Masochistic, the healing is increased to 10% of your maximum life. Honestly, it's not a very exciting ability. You usually just take it if you're playing a werewolf build. So next we're going to cover the legendary aspects. So we have aspect of the Earth Sign Horror. Tectonic damage is increased from 120 to 200 to 200 to 300. It's strong. It's good. The Storm Chaser aspect was it would seek targets, and now it seeks targets and deals multiplicative damage now. So overall, I would say this is probably the biggest buff for Tornado Druids, getting that additional multiplier on a aspect that would normally only provide targeting on enemies. So overall, I'd say this is probably the most beneficial aspect increase we see throughout all of these buffs here. Stormclaw aspect, you get an extra 20% damage whenever you crit with Shred, and lightning damage around the enemies. It's an extra 20%. It's not nothing. It's not amazing though. Aspect of natural balance. Earth critical strike damage is increased by 20%. So a solid 20% multiplier increase, which is solid. Storm skills critical strike chance increased to 10 to 15%. Crit strike, getting crit strike has never been an issue. So honestly, it's for storm skills, it's not that great, but the earth skills critical strike damage increase is pretty massive. Aspect of the trampled earth, landslide damage is increased from 70 to 110% to 100 to 140% of the normal damage. Solid. That's a solid increase in damage, but again, nothing too exciting there. Aspect of the Tempest, hurricane damage per second active increased from 10.5 to 20.5 to 15 to 25%. So apparently the Hurricane Druid is one of the top builds, so this just makes it a little bit better. So there's nothing wrong with that here. Aspect of the Rabid Bear, poison damage increased from 30 to 90%, is now 60 to 120%. So I don't think just increasing this damage on the Rabid Bear aspect is enough to make poison builds viable for Druids, because there is such a lacking in multipliers and ways to increase the poison damage. While this is still more poison damage, I don't think it's enough, but we'll see, because we are going to be testing our Shred and our Poison Grizzly Rage Druids tomorrow on stream. Lastly, we got some unique items. We got Erida's Inexorable Will. Damage scaling increased from 2% to 10% per 1 point of willpower. We'll see how much more damage that's going to be. That's honestly one of the best items for running Infernal Hordes and just general farming. So we'll see how that does. Dolmen Stone. Boulder damage per rotating boulder is increased by 10%. So I'd say that's just all around good, considering Boulder Druid is one of the better druids this season. Stone of Vehemen. Stone Burst. Final explosion damage increased from 10 to 15 to 15 to 20. So 5% damage increase on both the effects here for the stone. The Basilisk. Damage is increased from 100 to 600% damage to 300 to 900% damage. It's not nothing. The higher end is the higher end. I'm not sure what build would use the Basilisk, so I'd be interested to see what people have found out to see if this is a worthwhile item. Lastly, we have our one Paragon, which is the Constricting Tendrils legendary Paragon node. Lucky hit chance is increased from 15% to 40%, and the damage is increased from 150% to 300% of the skill's base damage. So all in all, I would say we got buffs, right? We got buffs, so it's not all bad, but I still think there's an underlying issue. There's nothing that's really addressed the poison damage with werewolf druids. The werewolf druids in general haven't really been addressed. Grizzly Rage still has issues, and on top of that, I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. These buffs are good. They're going to push them in the right direction. So tomorrow on stream, we're going to test out. We have a Grizzly Rage Poison Druid build we'll test out, and our Shred Druid, see how much of these buffs actually do help. See if we're able to push a little bit further. What do you think of these buffs for the Druid in general? Do you think they're good? Do you think they're mid? Do you think we got shafted again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. And good chance after tomorrow, we're pretty much just waiting till PoE 2. So that's it for me. I'm out of here. Come on, Blizzard. Get it right.